Hey, I'm Pharma, and this is my first impressions video for BLACKTAIL. BLACKTAIL is a roguelike survival RPG where you play through the origins of Baba Yaga, supposedly. I'm not too familiar with the story. Initially, the crafting survival mechanics scared me as I... Well, actually, let me go back and touch on. There's one setting I wanted to talk about, or one setting that I had to change initially, and that was the sensitivity. It was a bit high out of the gate. It defaulted to 10, which I think is the max on the scale that they provide. I set it to a 5. Seems to be about what I have for other games and what I would want for this. So that's one settings change I would recommend making right away. I think the game seems to run fine. Generally, when I say that, what I'm thinking is, like, does it run... Like, it's running on, I think, what they call epic settings in the settings, and I've got a 3080 Ti, so I would expect that to run smoothly. It does, so thumbs up there. Nothing that I really dug into or am very concerned about. So sensitivity, anyway, initially the crafting survival mechanics scared me, as I thought, in general, those sort of mechanics pad out gameplay and what otherwise is usually an empty game. That being said, this game has a dense amount of content so far that is fairly enjoyable. There also is a central story with markers on the map, so it's very easy to know what you need to do next. It's very nice given that the map is large and winding, and a lot of the environments are very nice to explore, and you just kind of get lost and sidetracked. I often found myself getting way off track exploring new areas, coming across little characters. And I'd be like, oh shit, where am I? What do I need to be doing? I can just pull up the map, boom, easy, done. Again, especially having just come off High on Life and not having access to a map, that was something that, like, was really concerning, and I'll touch on it a little bit more later, but the map's pretty good. There are some issues I had with the game, primarily UI related. And actually, I guess I initially said primarily UI related, but there are some, like, it's like UI/tutorial complaints. So first of all, I think there's, off the tutorial, I think there's very little in the way of tutorial, which could be alienating for some people. I did have to, for a couple of things early on, I did have to sort of mess around and figure out, like, what does what. But I was able to figure those things out. One example was cliffs. I don't think I was ever prompted with any sort of, like, UI prompt that says, hey, this is how you climb up these cliff ledges. I also didn't feel like there was an adequate enough tutorial for the hut portions as well. Specifically the cauldron. There were some of those things where when you're thrown that much information at one point in time, it's a full screen window with lots of different prompts, and by default it doesn't actually show you any text as to what you're upgrading and what it's going to do, and it doesn't really tell you, like, how to upgrade it, and you have to, it doesn't tell you that you press E to get more info. It's in the top right corner. If you take a step back and look at it and fully analyze everything on your screen, you will see the prompts for it. But when you're learning a new game and they throw all of that up on the screen, it can be a bit overwhelming, and initially I missed it. I don't think it was until the second time I returned to the cauldron that I was able to see that button, and then I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. Initially I was concerned with the map after a little exploration, as I had felt lost and I didn't believe that I had I don't think I had a quest marker at that point. It was, there's, like, the opening scene where you go to the Red Oak, and then after that there's a scene where, I don't know if it's where you go to the hut, but it puts you on a different place on the map. So the map only has, like, 2 circles of explored area that's shown to you, and I was like, oh shit, this is just gonna show me sort of, like, spots, and it's gonna jump around, like, oh, my character snaps to the Red Oak when I'm in that area.
What you speak of, girl.
But it did get. It's actually very informational for a map, which I think should be expected in most cases, unless you have a game design reason for not doing so.
Anyway, good luck.
But no, I eventually, like, having looked at it again later on, I pulled it up and I was like, oh wait, there's quest markers. And then also it shows you exactly where you are on the map and which direction. But not only that, there's like, the map is art. The map is like a work of art. It is a beautiful map. But that beautiful map isn't just like images of the place you are. There are some details. So like specifically when you're going to the dragon's lair or whatever, early on, there's like the stone area outside of it where you run into a character called the Knight or Knight. And that area, I feel, is very easy to get turned around and lost in. But if you look at the map, it actually, they've artfully drawn out the layout of that area. So you're like, oh, I can actually kind of navigate through here and find my way out. Again, not that big of an area. Wouldn't have been that big of a deal anyway. But it's nice because I am like, oh, okay, I just go this way. Instead of wasting time running in circles, getting frustrated. I think really complaint-wise, that's really all I have to complain about with the game. The characters are wonderful. They are a joy to encounter and interact with. Even the smaller, minor ones, they're sort of funny / grim. The dialogue is all a mix of dark and fun, which feels very fitting for the story. The art design for the game also feels very inspired, which is very refreshing. It's obviously not pinnacle of graphics or anything, but I do think the art design is much more important, and in a lot of ways I think the game nails it. One complaint I have for a lot of games is level design feeling samey. That is still here, but I think that the map really helps with some of it, and it's not necessarily entirely a bad thing. It's one of those things where I think that there are things you can do in games to make the levels seem more navigatable. I don't know what the word is. I don't even know if you can do that with navigation or but there are things you can do to like draw your eye to places or draw your eye away or like make certain places seem like a place you shouldn't be going or looking or whatever. And again, those issues are here, but it is very clear when you look at the map where you need to go and how you get there, and it's sort of it's a very good way to like reset your direction, and I think it's absolutely required if you're not going to be working that into the level design of a game. I'm trying to think. As far as level design, I think that's really it. Combat was surprisingly enjoyable. Starting off with a bow, and given the survival and crafting mechanics that I was given early on, I was honestly a little bit scared. But as the game progresses, you do unlock alternate arrow types, alternate fire modes, and then magic abilities that enhance and add depth to combat. You also do have a dash, which you're given right away, which allows you to reposition and gives you bursts of movement with a character that, relative to other games, is somewhat slow. Crafting arrows, so I guess we get into like where the survival RPG and crafting mechanics come in. You are going to be collecting a lot of resources, and those resources are required to craft things such as arrows. Specifically, you need to craft sticks and feathers. They are found plentifully across the map. And the crafting during combat specifically is very well done. I mean, I think they do a good job of the crafting in general for at least the arrows. I haven't unlocked a whole lot, but it's very easy. You just press tab and you left click on the arrows a bunch. I do wish there was an option to hold down left click and have it, you know, after a delay, it just starts ticking up your arrows until you're at your capacity. The arrow capacity limit was very low early on. It's only 9 arrows. I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I don't know if I hate it or if I'm fine with it. There's also an argument I think to be made that I could like it, or that I would not like the game as much if it was unlimited. Because there may be times where it's adding a sense of stress that wouldn't be there otherwise, and not necessarily the inclusion of it would add anything, or like the removal of the cap would the removal of the cap wouldn't necessarily make the game better, but it makes the game not worse. It does also add difficulty to combat situations that otherwise are not difficult, because you do have to, it adds more importance to every shot, and then you do have to recraft those. And especially, I don't think it matters so much in the boss fights, but even then, like, because I'm thinking about it now, and I'm like, I guess, like, it would. I always, because I see something sparkling that says, come collect me, and I always go and collect it. And so I'm always going into these fights with, like, full stacks of sticks and feathers, and so I never have an issue with, like, oh, shit, I'm out of things. I need to, like, go collect sticks and feathers on the, like, boss fight area. But at least 2 of the boss fights did have sticks and feathers that were collectible in the area. And so I'm saying, like, if you do run out and you do craft all of that, I could see that that adds, like, again, another mechanic where you're dodging stuff while trying to gather resources on the map. I would say jury's kind of out on if I think that is good. If it's fluff, I wouldn't say it's bad, but I don't really know how I feel about it. Does it give me enjoyment? Would the game have been as fun if I didn't have to do those things? I don't know. Anyway, we can jump into boss fights. I think it's probably the last thing I really have to touch on is boss fights. I would say they're okay. I think that from a mechanical point of view, they're very simplistic in nature, but the themes of the boss fights are what's really good. It is so enjoyable fighting these creatures. And there is, like, I'm trying to think, because it's like all of the creatures do very much fit into this, like, grim, dark but fun setting and theme, and they're very enjoyable and very well done, and they stick to that. And I guess as far as they go, I would say, like, while they're simple, I do feel like they're executed relatively cleanly. I say relatively. I don't think the first boss fight was the cleanest. It felt very chaotic and not in, like, a, oh, there's a bunch of crazy things happening and I need to be, like, fast and dodging stuff. It was like, none of this fight makes sense to me. And, like, I can't necessarily tell what's going to happen, but it wasn't a difficult fight. It was just kind of weird. It was a weird experience. It was like, I don't understand why this boss fight is happening the way that it is, but okay. Feels a little bad to end on something that seems a little middling, but all in all, I would have to say that BLACKTAIL, I said would in a way that was, like, begrudgingly, but it's not begrudgingly at all. I actually really enjoyed the game. It's very good. It's definitely one of the best games I played this year. I highly recommend this, either A, if you like the setting, or B, if you find RPGs with roguelike survival crafting mechanics to be enjoyable. I will say, again, roguelike survival crafting mechanics in an RPG scared me. That whole genre of, like, especially survival crafting really just terrifies me when I see it, because to me, I'm like, okay, this is not a fully fleshed out idea, but I think it's done very well here, and it's utilized in this game well. Or, again, coming back to what I said earlier, this game is just so good that it doesn't matter that the survival crafting mechanics are there. But maybe, again, maybe they do add some stress or something to the theme that is important. I haven't played the game without them, so I don't know, but I'd be very curious if that was like a decision or something that was made inside if they played it without and they were like, no, it has to have crafting mechanics. It does have to have some limited survival mechanics. But anyway, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, if you have any criticisms, please share them with me. I would like to get better at doing this. I'm starting to sort of get an idea of a framework down so that I can be making more content. And it's really been nice because it's a way of forcing myself to play more single player games. I've gone into a sort of repetitive area where I was playing a lot of multiplayer games, and this just adds a lot more enjoyment in games to me, and it gives me something to do, something to say like, hey, you need to be playing this game, instead of like, oh, you can just play one more game of Apex or one more game of League of Legends tonight. But anyway, again, I appreciate it. Please share if you've got any feedback or anything else. Otherwise, have a good night.